Hello and a very warm good evening to all of you. I welcome you all to the Daily News Simplified session of the Raus IAS dated 17th of March 2024. Today in this session, we are going to take up important news and articles from two leading newspapers, that is the Hindu and the Indian Express. So the first article, as you can see the list of articles on your screen, there are two main centric articles, that is Women in India and then the CAA Rules that have been highlighted in the newspaper, and then majorly we have the prelim centric articles. So because the prelims is nearing, and so our main focus today is on a more prelim centric portion. So in this context, the first article we have is regarding the situation of women in Indian society. So this news regarding how women in India have fared, it appears on the Hindu newspaper on the page 13. And the context of the article is that recently on 8th of March, International Women's Day was celebrated. And in the context of this celebration, the author is presenting a comparative analysis of the condition of women in India and globally. And in this regard, the author basically seeks to highlight that the policies of India, even though it is a developing nation, it is quite favorable to the inclusive development of women vis-a-vis the policies of the developed nations. And to strengthen his argument, the author basically talks about as to how in USA, he's taking the example of USA, he's talking about how there have been 46 presidents of USA till now, but none have been from female section. But if you take the example of India, our current president is also a woman, and before that also we had Miss Pratibha Patil as our president. So this news becomes important from the section of GS paper 1, where you have the topic of role of women and women's organization and various issues related to them. And due to this relevance of women in Indian society, even UPSC has focused a lot in the previous year questions. As you can see in the mains, there was a question regarding empowering women is the key to control population growth in India. On similar lines, you have the question of what is the role of gig economy in the process of empowerment of women, as to how gig economy can empower the women. So you can see that there are multiple questions that have focused on the situation of women in India, and in this context, today we are going to delve deeper. We are going to see what policies basically or what data show that women in India have been empowered to some extent, what are the challenges that still remain in that, and what can be the way forward going into the 2047 goal of being a developed nation as a globally. Okay, so let's start with the discussion. Now, women empowerment in India, we're going to talk under different categories, and the first category that we have is in the political sector. So if you see MPs, MLAs and local bodies, so in the local bodies, if you see the panchayats that were given constitutional status by 73rd and the urban local bodies by 74th, the data by the government shows that there are around 3 crore women who are currently participating in the decision making process at the grassroots level. So there are around 3 crore women participation in these local bodies. Similarly, if you see the data of ministers presently, there has been an increasing trend of women being appointed as ministers or women being given tickets by the political parties. Thirdly, you can see the case of officers. And in particular, we are going to talk about the IAS officers from female categories. In 1950, the data shows that the women IAS officers constituted just around 2.7% of the share, but today it is around 30%. So the share of women IAS officers has gone up from 2.7% in 1950 to 30% presently. So this shows that the political empowerment of women to some extent has been possible in India. Similarly, the other important news currently, as you must have read about the Nari Shakti Vandana Adhiniyam, that is the 106th constitutional amendment that gives 33% reservation to women in India. And where does it give? In the Lok Sabha and in the State Legislative Assembly. So there is going to be a fixed number of seats from which only women candidates can be elected. So ultimately what it will do, the share of women MPs and the share of women MLAs, it will go up, minimum up to the level of 33%. So all these policies show that the political empowerment of women on account of certain inclusive development policies of the government is taking place. Now let us talk about the economic dimension. In the economic dimension, if you see the topic of women CEOs and pilots, the author in the article today, he mentions that the women-led startup has got a boost in India presently. For example, he talks about startups in the beauty products, startups in the entertainment industry. Then you have startups in the biotech sector. For example, the very famous example is the example of Miss Kiran Mazumdar Shaw, who is a very famous female entrepreneur in India. And even a report by Bain and Company, there is a report by Bain and Company that suggests that around 20% enterprises in India are owned by women. Around 20% enterprises in India are owned by women. So this shows that the financial empowerment of women is taking place. To quote another data, around 12% pilots in India are female. Around 12% pilots in India belong to female category. But globally, if you see, this data is only around 3%. So the global average is 3%, but we are way above that in the employment of women in those sectors, that is as pilot in the aviation sector, where the representation is around 12%, Similarly, if you see the model of gig economy, one of the major reasons being cited as a boost to gig economy is regarding the employability that it provides to women in India. That is, sitting at home, you can start your own business through the gig economy platform. So these developments basically show that the current ecosystem is in India in the economic sector is somewhat conducive to the financial empowerment of women. Although we'll see a counter argument also in the financial, but as of now, remember that the financial empowerment of women using these datas. Okay, the next we have is regarding the women head in government schemes. For example, you must have read under the provisions of various schemes that the scheme's benefit is going to be entitled on the female head of the family. For example, you have the National Food Security Act. The card that is issued to the family, that is issued on the name of the eldest women that is present in the family. Similarly, the Pradhan Mantri Awas Yojana, you have the registration of the house under the scheme that is done on the name of the eldest female member in the family, that is the female head of the family. So this shows that the government is looking to financially empower women by providing them certain rights under the scheme as such. Okay, so this shows that the economic empowerment of women has taken place in India. Now let us have a look at the next, that is the social dimension. Now in the social dimension, if you see, the first dimension is of the education. And in the education, basically, if you see the data of All India Survey on Higher Education, the All India Survey on Higher Education basically suggests that, or it points out that the female gross enrollment ratio is around 47.3% in India, whereas the male gross enrollment ratio in India is around 46.8%. So, even though a very minute difference, but still the female gross enrollment ratio in India is higher than the male. And this is in the education sector. Similarly, in the health sector, if you see the health sector, the NFHS 5 report, it talks about certain improvement in the health indicators of women. That is, the TFR rate has come down to 2. The target under the national population policy was 2.1, but we have achieved a more better target, that is a TFR of 2. And on similar lines, some other improvements such as the contraceptive usage in India, it has improved to around 66%. It has improved to around 66%. And similarly, another data, that is the institutional birth in India, it has increased to 89%. Now, this shows that the health condition of women on account of more institutional deliveries, on account of more contraceptive usage, that basically benefits the reproductive health of women on account of improvement in the total fertility rate, so that women have more time to invest in productive activities such as in the economic sector, that may increase their employability. So this shows that in the social indicators, the health and education, women are doing well. Similarly, you have the case of a social image that is created. Now, if you see, the social image of women is mainly of a homemaker, but in the current ecosystem of India, you must be like regularly coming across the names of various talented officers in India, such as we write in the ethics paper the example of Miss Durga Shakti Nagpal, and then you have the IPS officer Miss Anukriti Sharma. So these basically officers, they, through their commendable work, what are they doing is that they are shaping the social image of women. That is, the women are suited in the role of leadership in the society. They are not the just homemakers. So this the regular achievements of these female bureaucrats indicates that society is accepting them in the traditional patriarchal social positions. Okay, so this shows that the social improvement of women in India is taking place. Similarly, you can talk about the child marriage in India. Now, child marriage in India, way back in 2005, it was around in 47.7% something. But today, if you see the NFHS data, it talks that it is around 23.3%. Although this is also quite high, but still there has been a considerable reduction in the prevalence of child marriage in India. So all this show that there has been a constant push or a constant improvement in the condition of women in India. Okay, so this is the entire data, the entire ecosystem that suggests that the women empowerment in India is taking place. But as we highlighted, that empowerment has taken place along with the persistence of challenges. So now we are going to see the challenges that still persist in the empowerment of women in India. Now, first we are going to talk about the political challenges. Just a minute. Okay. So, in the political challenges, if you see, there is a consistent data that comes out that the representation of women MPs is just around 14%. So a very minuscule percentage of women MPs are there in the parliament. Similarly, we read that around 3 crore women are actively participating in political decision making at the grassroots level. But in that very ecosystem, you have the issue of sarpanchpatis. You have the issue of sarpanchpatis, where women are generally projected as a proxy candidate and the entire decision is taken in their behalf by some male member of their family and preferably their husband, and that is why the title sarpanchpatis. Okay, so the entire mechanism of empowerment of women politically at that level gets negated by these phenomena. And thirdly, you have the issue of criminalization of politics. And the data suggests that this has increased to a level of 43%. 43%. And on account of the criminalization of politics, many female candidates do not prefer to file their nominations, and this inherently reduces their representation in the Lok Sabha or in the state legislative assembly, as we can see in this data. So this is the political setup of, or the political background of challenges that exist in the empowerment of women in India. Then comes the economic. Now in economic, if you see, we say that 20% enterprises in India are owned by women, but still you have a very famous term, that is glass cliff or ceiling. And this data is, and this is aptly substantiated by a data by NSO and its survey, PLFS survey, that in the managerial positions of company, women account for just 18%. So around 82% representation at managerial position is going to the male section. So this is the ground level reality of financial empowerment of women at these positions, at the higher level positions. And in this context, if you see the employment rate or the female labor force participation rate, if you see, it was around 45% in 1990. But what happened is that with the LPG era, it came down to around 23%. Firstly, it decreased, and even in this decrease, the 95% of women in India, they are employed where? In the unorganized sector. So first of all, the quantity of work that is available to them is quite less, and in that quantity, the very limited quantity that they are working, their quality is compromised. That is in rural India, if you see, where it is said that the female labor force participation rate is quite high, but if you go to the ground level, you see that 90-95% women are working as unpaid labor in their agricultural field. And when you see the data of how employment rate is calculated, you see that unpaid labor is also a category. So this shows that at ground level, real employability of women is not taking place. Okay. And in this category, you have one more data, that around 70% of employees in certain sectors that are called pink sectors, such as in the health sector, you have the job of nurse. In the education sector, you have certain jobs. Those are called the pink sectors. They are still very much gender stereotyped, in the sense that 70% representation is by women. But when it comes to sectors like, you say, being a faculty in a IIT, the author in the article says that the female faculties are only 20% in the technological institutes, especially the STEM institutes that we talk about, that is in IITs or IISc or IISERs. And even in the ratio of students, it is just around 20%. So the real economic empowerment that should have taken place on account of higher level of skills, on account of higher level of employment, that is not taking place. Okay. Now comes the issue of care work. Like, there is a term we talk about, double shift. The double shift being performed by women, that is, on one account they are doing paid work outside their home, and when they come back to home, they are doing what? Unpaid work also. And in this regard, what is happening? There was a time use survey that was conducted there was a time use survey that was conducted by NSO, and it suggested that in India, what is happening is that women are spending 19%, 19.5% of her time in unpaid care work, 19.5% of their time in unpaid care work, whereas the male section time is only around 2.5%, vis-a-vis the 19.5% time of women. So this shows the disproportionate burden of unpaid care work on women in India, which is hindering the real financial empowerment or the real economic empowerment of women in India. Okay, then comes the social. And in social, if you see for example, if we take the health sector, in the health sector, if you see the case of abortion, now NFHS 5 says that 27% of abortions are being done by women themselves at home. That is, unsafe abortions are taking place, 27%, and the same data suggests that around 8 women die every day due to abortion related issues in India. Okay, this was the health. Even in social, you have a category of social stereotyping, and in this you have a report by UNICEF that talks about gender stereotyping in advertisement. So what is happening is that basically, if you see, it is said that women are getting more screen time, where on TVs, maybe in some advertisement, maybe in some songs. But what is happening is that the kind of role that is being allotted to them in that advertisement, that is again reinforcing a gender stereotype. That if a ad is shown, or say pressure cooker, there is ad of pressure cooker, then the women will be shown operating that pressure cooker, and the husband will be sitting on the sofa waiting for the food to be cooked. So even though the screen presence is more of the women, but the kind of role that she's projecting, that is again reflecting the gender stereotype by the maker of that ad. Okay, so that is again reinforcing the idea of gender division. So this is the issue in the social sector. For example, again, you see health, the issue of menstrual stigma. There is a report by UN that suggests that around 20% girl students in India, they are dropping out after the start of the menstrual cycle because of the stigma associated with that, and the lack of safe places or the lack of proper toilets to maintain menstrual hygiene in schools. So this shows that the social upliftment has not taken place up to the level that was targeted in the government schemes. Okay, so this is the social part, and in social part we have a section of crimes, that is crimes against women. As NCRB talks about, that there are more than 4 lakh cases of crimes against women, which is a very high number. And what are those crimes? If we talk about, let's start with the childhood. And if we start with the childhood, you have the cases of child marriages, that is around 15 lakh child marriages still take place per year in India, and this is the report of UNICEF. Similarly, you have the case of child trafficking, sexual harassment, and child abuse. Okay, then if you see at the pre-birth stage, there is a case of female feticide, and there is a report called Status of World Population Report. Which says that there are around 45.8 million missing females in India. So the number that was extrapolated, that as per the population growth scenario, the number of females should be particular, say 100, but the number is short by around 45.8 million in the total number. So this is a very high number, and this has been highlighted in the status of world population report, and the reason being that excessive rate of female feticide is taking place still in some parts of India. Then you have the reproductive age, where the major issue, as is even in the news, as in the case of judicial adjudication that is going on regarding the criminalization of marital rape, whether it should be done or not. So in this regard, marital rape is the major issue that has still not dealt with, as in the Bharatiya Nyaya Samhita there is still no criminalization of marital rape in India. With regard to domestic violence, if you see the NFHS data, it says that 29.3% women in India faced domestic violence, and out of this 29.3%, in certain states such as Gujarat and some other states, Karnataka for that matter, around 70% women did not want any kind of help regarding that. So it shows the prevalence of domestic violence to a very extensive scale, not only at the level of men but even in the mindset of women. Okay, then comes the case of forced marriages and honor killings. As in recently you have heard a case in Delhi where a girl was murdered by her father and her brother in a case of honor killing. Then you have the age of elderly. And there is a study of longitudinal aging study of India. That is, in short, it is called the Lassi survey. And what is happening in this is that it shows that the 9% of elderly females, they are staying alone, and what is happening is that elderly abuse as a process or as a social phenomena is gradually increasing in society. Why? Because the female section of that age, they are lacking the property rights. On account of the lacking of property rights, they are financially dependent on their family relative, on their family members, and on account of that they are being exploited. So this is the story of challenges that still persist. That is what data shows that the empowerment of women has taken place. Then we saw what data shows that the challenges still remain in those very sectors where empowerment has taken place. And thirdly and lastly, we are going to see what policies can be enacted and how can the policies be streamlined to achieve our target of women empowerment in India. Now, firstly, we have to work at the level of schemes, that is both in terms of input and in terms of outcome. In terms of input, because the gender budgeting in India, it started way back in 2004-5, but it has still not gained the pace that it should have achieved as of now. In this regard, the share is very minimal as a percentage of total GDP, and on account of that, what is happening is that on top of that, the expenditure that is taking place in the schemes dedicated for women, that is, you say Beti Bachao Beti Padhao, around 70-80% of expenditure is taking place on media advertisement, on the advertisement of the scheme. So the quality of expenditure that should have taken place, that is not being maintained, and the real utilization of the funds is not happening at the ground level. So both the input, that is the money that is flowing into the scheme, that needs to be enhanced, and the money utilization process, that needs to be enhanced at the grassroots level. So this is at the level of schemes. Similarly, at the level of society, you have three basic entities, that is family, school, and then the entire setup of society. So at the level of family, what is taking place is the process of canalization. In the process of canalization, what happens is that gradually the family setup is such that the mindset of female child and the male child gets constructed in such a way that the gender reality becomes the absolute reality. Like they are socialized to believe that, for example, the very famous example is that females are considered weak in maths and good in the field of medicals, in the medical, but boys are considered to be good in engineering. As you see, even in the All India Survey on Higher Education, there is a gender profiling kind of a thing, that you can get an idea that more women are going to medical sector and less women are going in the engineering sector. So why is this happening? Because of a canalization process that is happening, that is shaping their mindset at the very root, that is at the family level, where the core structure of your idea is developing as a person, the core personality you have developing there. And this gets reinforced at the level of school, that is, you learned certain things that the female students, being a female, my math is weak, and that gets reinforced when you go to your school and you see that you do not have any maths teacher in your school, and the entire ecosystem is such that the belief of your is reinforced that yes, the idea is right that females are weak in maths. So what is happening is that at this level, the socialization process needs to be changed to the extent that there should be a gender equal, okay, I will write here, there should be a gender equality that should be prevailing both at the level of schools and at the level of family. That is, maybe in school gender sensitization workshops can be organized. At the family level, parents can act as an like appropriate example of how to behave in a gender neutral manner. So these values, these core values and this mindset which needs to be changed, they will take place at the family level and the school level, and that is why the process of socialization that is taking place, that needs to be reconstructed. And thirdly, at the level of society, the mindset change is required, in the sense that, for example, if somebody has been raped, if a girl has been raped, the scenario is that in this situation, the victim feels the stigma and not the person who has committed the crime. Similarly, the issue of, like we read about menstrual stigma, then you have other assumptions from women, other stereotypes on women, such as the term pativrata naris, that evaluates women in terms of how obedient a wife she is. Like a Pew Research study was conducted in India, and what happened is that the data pointed that 9 out of 10 respondents think that the wife should always obey her husband. Wife should always obey her husband. And another data suggests that 94% of respondents in that think that it is very necessary for a family to have at least one son. It is very necessary for a family to have at least one son. So this shows that the patriarchy at the level of society, that is deeply ingrained, and so this needs to be changed through, again, some sensitization model. Gender sensitization model can take place, some seminars, some street theaters can be organized on this. Okay, then we have at the level of authority the change that needs to be brought about. At the level of authority, firstly, the entire ecosystem we see, like if we take the example of police mechanism, the police system in India, the system should be designed like, now we have the example of pink police booths in India. The police station model, basically they need to be made gender friendly. Gender friendly means female friendly, in the sense that if some woman has faced any crime, she should feel encouraged and feel motivated that there is a conducive ecosystem to redress her grievances, and she should not be hesitant that she may again get stigmatized or maybe stereotyped in the police station itself, like we sometimes hear in the news, that a rape victim was inappropriately questioned in the police station. So that sort of environment in the grassroots institutions such as police stations, that needs to be changed and make it a more female friendly. Similarly, at the level of political level, the 106th constitutional amendment no doubt has brought about 33% reservation for women, but that is not the end of the road, and it is again the responsibility of the political parties to encourage, to give more tickets to women candidates, so that a favorable perception is created among the public that women in leadership role is not an exception. It is a general thing. It is a general thing like we consider for male section. Okay. So this is the change that is required at the political level, that is giving more tickets to women candidates and bringing more gender friendly changes or female or women friendly changes in their political institutions. Then thirdly, the female bureaucrats, you can link this to this point, that is role models. That is the previous example that I gave of such IAS officer like Durga Shakti Nagpal and IPS officer like Anukriti Sharma. They should be projected as role models so that females are able to think beyond the conventional boundaries that is imposed upon them, and they should seek career in such authoritative positions, so that a stamp gets engraved, or maybe they get an favorable view of the society that the position of women in these authority positions is not an exception but a very general phenomena. Okay, then comes the section of women-led change in India. Women-led change in India, that is firstly as the female bureaucrats, and maybe in other field, maybe some female entrepreneur also you can take, who could be projected, who could be brought to the schools to give lectures on what are the possible future options for women in financial sector. So all this can be done under this section of role model mechanism. Then comes the process of civil society initiatives. For example, the self-help group initiative in Kerala has been highly successful in empowering the women there, and that is why you see a lot of favorable outcome in terms of highest literacy rate, best health indicators, and that is on account because of one of the major reasons has been the SHG model, the success of SHG model, which you famously know as Kudumbashri. Okay, and on similar lines, like in Bihar, you have a model of Jivika Didi. On similar lines, various civil society initiatives can be started by women themselves. Take an example of Miss Ella Bhatt, who revolutionized this female trade union sector in India. On similar lines, we can bring in more women-centric initiatives that are led by women themselves to make it more favorable for other women to join in those initiatives. Okay, and lastly, we have the international efforts. And in the international efforts, what you have is that the UN Women has started certain initiatives such as Equals, and then you have the initiative of Generation Equality Forum, and basically Equals and Generation Equality Forum, these initiatives have been started so as to bring in more women in those sectors where still the dominance of male section is quite high. For example, in financial sector, at the managerial position, that we saw 18% representation only, and maybe more women in organized sector, more number of women in faculty positions in engineering institutes. So this initiative of Equals and Generation Equality Forum, that it seeks to basically promote this model of encouraging women participation in certain sectors. Okay, so this is based on this discussion. I have a mains practice question for you, that is, I will read out for you. Government policies and interventions have extensively benefited the women in India, but not to the extent of driving them out of the clutches of patriarchy. Comment. So you can, based on the discussion and based on the data that I have given you, you can write a 250 word answer on this and substantiate your arguments. The data that I have given you, that are, those are mainly for the substantiation for the arguments that you give. So you can attempt this question. Now let us move to the next topic. So the next topic appears on the page 14 of the newspaper The Hindu, and as you all must be knowing that on 11th March the government of India has notified the CAA rules for the implementation of Citizenship Act 2019. So this article is in this context only, and it has a very precise argument about which communities are going to benefit more from the rules. And so we'll see a kind of summary of this article in this, and it becomes important from which section, that is GS paper 2, where you have the portion of Indian Constitution and its significant provisions. And as you all know that in part 2 of the Constitution you have the provision of citizenship. And if you see in 2021 there was also a question on citizenship in the prelims. So this shows the relevance of the topic, and based on this we will discuss the summary of this article. Now the context is that if you see article 5 to 11 in the Indian Constitution, it basically talks about citizenship in India. But Article 11 as such, it empowers the parliament to regulate the citizenship ecosystem in India, And based on this article, the parliament enacted the Citizenship Act of 1955 so as to lay down the guideline as to who is eligible for citizenship in India, what is the mechanism of acquiring the citizenship, and what is the mechanism of losing the Indian citizenship or depriving someone of Indian citizenship. So this was laid out in the Act of 1955. But the government in 2019, through the Citizenship Amendment Act, it amended the Act of Citizenship 1955. And on account of this amendment, it introduced for the first time citizenship based on religious criteria. That is, the crux of the Citizenship Amendment Act 2019 is that people from 6 religious communities, that is Hindus, Jains, Buddhists, Sikhs, Parsis, Christians, who are coming from 3 neighboring countries, and those countries are Afghanistan, Pakistan and Bangladesh. So people of these 6 religions, if they are coming from these 3 countries before the date of 31st December 2014, if they are coming to India, then they are eligible to obtain citizenship under the amended law. And that is why the basic criteria for citizenship is a religion in this case. And for implementation of this amended act, the Citizenship Amendment Rule has been brought. So this rule basically lists down in the article, as it is mentioned, certain documents that are very much necessary so as to prove your eligibility for obtaining the citizenship. And what are those documents? That is proof of origin. That is, you have come from either of these 3 countries. You have to prove that through a document. Similarly, you have a document of proof of entry. That is, you entered India before 31st December 2014. You have to show it through a document, a legal or a valid document. And thirdly is the proof of religion. That is, you should show that through the document that may be issued by some local community organization that you belong to these 6 specified religions that have been mentioned in the rules. That is Hindu, Sikhs, Buddhists, Jains and all those. So these 3 kinds of documents are required under the rules. And based on these analysis of rules, the article talks about three major communities who are going to benefit from the CAA rules. And firstly, it talks about the Sikhs and Hindus who are coming from Pakistan. Like many Sikhs and Hindus, as the article talks about, that came via legal route through legal mechanism of visa and passport. But what has happened is that their visas and passport have expired, but still they have been residing in India. So for them, if they have come before 31st of December 2014, they are eligible to apply for citizenship under the act. They are eligible to apply for citizenship under the act. And previously there was 11 years of time period if you are applying through the route of naturalization process, but now this time period has been cut down to just 5 years. So this will be more favorable to these people who maybe have completed 6 years with a expired visa or passport, so they can apply. Similarly, the second one is the Matua community of Bengal, who have migrated to India from erstwhile East Bengal or now the Bangladesh. The Matua community, basically they are a like community belonging to the section of scheduled tribes, and they were follower of a religious guru, Harichand Thakur, in around 19th century, and they have a considerable presence in the region of Bengal, around 2.8 crore or something in total, their presence in the Bengal region. And so it is said that those who have migrated from the region of Bangladesh to India, the people of this community, they may be benefited from the provisions of citizenship rules, as they may be granted the citizenship belong on the premise that they belong to the community of Hindus. That is, Hinduism is one of the religion mentioned in the article or in the rules. Then thirdly is those who were excluded under the NRC. That is, an NRC was conducted in Assam. Recently, the data was compiled in 2019 based on the decision of Supreme Court. And based on that decision, what happened is that around 19 lakh people were excluded from the list. That is, 19 lakh people were on the verge of losing their citizenship, and they have their cases pending in the foreign tribunals. Now what will happen is that if those people who belong in this category of excluded, if they belong to either of these 6 religions, they are eligible now to apply for the citizenship in India. So these 3 categories of people, basically they will benefit from the provisions of citizenship amendment rules. Okay, so this is the basic crux of this article. Now let us move to the next article. Now comes the next article, which appears on the page 8 of the Hindu, which talks about a recent issue that a teacher in government teacher, basically he was sacked by the Lieutenant Governor of Jammu Kashmir on account of an old incident in which he had participated in a local protest against the government. So on account of this, the article 311 is in news, and we will look at what power does it give to the president or the governor or the lieutenant governor as such to take action against the civil servants. And as you can see in GS paper 2, you have again the Indian Constitution and the significant provisions as one portion, and the role of civil services in democracy. So it becomes important from both the perspectives. And in a PYQ in 2019, you had a question on impeachment of judge of the Supreme Court. So on similar lines, we will see how a civil servant can be removed in India. Now there are 3 basic articles, 309, 10 and 11 under part 14 of the Indian Constitution, that talks about the civil servants and their appointment, their regulation of the conditions of service, and their removal process. So basically, if you see in Bare Act in Article 309, basically it talks about the regulation of the conditions of service of persons who are serving as civil servant. And who will regulate this their conditions of service? That is at the union level. This regulation will take place by the parliament, and at the state level this is going to take by the state legislature. Okay, so parliament and state legislature, they are going to regulate the conditions of service of their employees, that is those serving in the under the central government and those serving under the state government. So under article 309, and if say a certain law has not been enacted to regulate their condition of service, then in the immediate effect what will happen is that the president and the governor becomes empowered to regulate till the extent ki the parliament or the state legislature has not enacted a law. Okay, under article 310, what do you have? That is tenure of office of the persons of serving under union or state. That is, what will be the tenure or what will be the term of office of this civil servants. So under article 310, it is said that the officers of the union government and officers of the state government, they serve under the till the pleasure of the president. At the union level and at the state level, it is the pleasure of the governor. Okay, under article 310. But the most interesting provision it is that we are going to talk about is article 311, that basically talks about the removal process of civil servant in India, that is dismissal, removal or reduction in rank. Now it is, there are three important elements in this. That firstly, it says that a civil servant cannot be removed by an authority. A civil servant cannot be removed by an authority subordinate to the one who appointed him. So if I now ask you a question that if I say a statement that an IAS officer can be removed by the governor, so is this statement correct? It is not. Why? Because the IAS officer who has appointed him in general, that is the President of India. So governor is an authority that is subordinate to the President of India. So being in that position, the governor does not have the right to remove the IAS officer from the service as such. Okay. Then you have the provision of that before removing a civil servant, he has to be given an opportunity to represent himself at the level of inquiry. Okay, that is, when you want to remove a civil servant, you conduct an inquiry. And what happened is that by the 15th constitutional amendment, a provision was inserted, as you can see in this act, that in this, no person after an inquiry which has been in which he has been informed of the charges against him and given a reasonable opportunity of being heard. So this provision was inserted by the 15th constitutional amendment, that before removing an IAS officer or say any officer under the union government, you have to conduct an inquiry and give an opportunity, a reasonable opportunity to that particular officer of being heard at the stage of inquiry. But another interesting provision in this is that by the 46th amendment, the 42nd constitutional amendment, it inserted that the reasonable opportunity of representation, it is available only at the level of inquiry. That is, at the level of inquiry, you will get the opportunity to be heard. But once the inquiry has been conducted and it has been said that a particular penalty has been imposed upon you or a particular punishment has been imposed upon you, then at this stage of punishment, you do not get the opportunity of being heard. That is, at that level, you cannot contest that you were not heard at the level of granting the punishment. So this is the mechanism, and this was inserted by 42nd constitutional amendment and this through 15th constitutional amendment. Okay, now the clause that has come into news because of the Jammu Kashmir incident is this one, that is, there are some exceptional clauses or exceptional situations where a president does not, or a governor does not need to hold the inquiry to remove the public servant, and the case in Jammu Kashmir is of this, that is the president or the lieutenant governor at of that UT. What he has done is that he has issued an order for removal without conducting an inquiry, obtaining power from Article 311, where it says that if the authority is satisfied for some reason that it is not reasonable or practicable to hold such inquiry, that he can skip that. That if the authority who is removing is satisfied that it is not reasonable to hold a inquiry, then it can be skipped. And similarly, if it is in public interest, that is, the president feels that an inquiry cannot be conducted in the public interest or the security of the state, then that inquiry cannot be, that then the contestation cannot be that the inquiry was not conducted. That is, you can skip the inquiry. On what ground? On the ground of security of state. Okay. And the last provision says that the decision in this regard, whether the inquiry was necessary or not, the decision taken by the president or the governor, that should be the final. That is, there will be no contestation that the reason given by the president for not holding an inquiry was malified or arbitrary as such. Okay, so this decision, as mentioned in the Bare Act, it is final. Okay, so this is the basic crux of the Article 311, that there is a process for removal by the president or the governor or the lieutenant governor, and at the process of removal, at the stage of removal, you have two processes, that is conducting an inquiry and then giving a punishment. But at the level of conducting the inquiry, at the level of inquiry, you give an opportunity to the officer of being heard. But once the inquiry is finished, then no consultation, that is, directly you can order the punishment. But there are exceptional clauses where you do not have to hold the inquiry, such as the security of state. So this is the crux of Article 311. Now let us move to the next article. Then this news is basically in page 8 of the Hindu, where it talks about that the Kerala government is trying to register a particular indigenous breed, a particular breed of cow found there as indigenous breed, and the name of that breed is Thenamala Kulan. Sorry for the pronunciation. So Thenamala Kulan, that is the name of the breed that the Kerala government is planning to register or apply for the registration as a indigenous breed. And this becomes important from GS paper 3, both from the science and tech perspective and also from the perspective of environment. That is, in the environment section you can be asked, such as in the 2020 prelims paper, you had a question regarding some terminologies that were given, and you had to identify that which of these categories are symbolized by these terminologies. So definitely a similar question can be that Thenamala Kulan, a term seen in the news, is a category of. So in that regard, you have to remember the term of Thenamala Kulan, that is it is a cow breed that is native to Kerala. But in this article, what we are going to see is the process of registration of animal breed in India. That is the crux of this article. So the nature of materials that are eligible for registration, that is, what kind of animals can be registered. Both domesticated and wild animals can be registered, but there are three conditions, that is, it should have academic, scientific and commercial value or commercial value. It can be a domesticated animal or a wild animal or a relative of that in the wild, and it should have a academic, scientific or a commercial value. That is the nature of the material. Then eligibility is that it should, the animal that you are planning to register as an indigenous breed, it should have at least 1,000 animals in population. Okay, it should have at least 1,000 animals in population. That is the number eligibility. The third is the breed registration committee, before which you have to apply so that your document gets scanned or scrutinized there. So this breed registration committee, it will be constituted under the chairmanship of Deputy Director General of ICAR, that is Indian Council of Agricultural Research. So this whole thing is taking place under which ministry? Ministry of Agriculture. So there is what? A breed registration committee headed by the Deputy Director General of ICAR, that is Indian Council of Agricultural Research. Then there is a nodal agency which grants this breed status, and that is the National Bureau of Animal Genetic Resources. The National Bureau of Animal Genetic Resources. So this is the nodal agency. So if I ask you a question, the breed registration place in India, the breed registration procedure in India is conducted by which agency? So the answer will be the National Bureau of Animal Genetic Resources. Then who can apply that? In the case in this news, if you see, it is said that, just a minute, it is said that Kerala Animal Husbandry Department, it is trying to apply for the registration process. So which all agency can apply? That is, even a citizen of India individually can apply, or maybe some society group, or maybe some NGO, or maybe some government agency as such can apply. So if I tell you a statement that only a group of only a society or a NGO group or a government agency is eligible for applying for registration of breed in India, so is this a correct statement? No. Why? Because a citizen of India is also individually eligible to apply for registration. Then after granting registration, what is the validity period? It is the 25 years. That is, it is not for the lifetime. It is for some duration, that is 25 years. And there is also a mechanism for denotification. That is, if you give false documents and it is found out after some stage, then that notification of registration of the breed, that can again be cancelled. Okay, so denotification is also a mechanism under it. So this is the basic crux of this article. Remember the name of the breed, that is Thenmalakulan, and some important points, that is which is the nodal agency as such to grant the registration process, and then what is the period of registration and all those things. Now let us move to the next article, that is regarding the sickle cell anemia drug. And this news basically it appears on page 11 of the Hindu, which basically is in the context that a Delhi based entity, that is Akmas Drugs and Pharmaceuticals Limited, it has basically developed a indigenous drug for the treatment of sickle cell disease in India. And in this context, what has happened is that the Health Minister of India has hailed this as a like a very big achievement, because the government is currently pursuing a mission which we'll talk about for the elimination of sickle cell disease in India, and this discovery, this invention becomes quite crucial in that process. And this again becomes important from GS paper 3, the portion of science and technology, that is the major developments in science and technology and their effects in daily life. Similarly, if you see in 2023, in the previous year question, this year prelims, there was a question on anemia, and sickle cell anemia is one thing that is having a very high prevalence rate, especially among the tribals in India. Okay. Now sickle cell anemia, if you see that in this diagram, it is basically a RBC disorder. It is a RBC disorder and it is a genetic disorder. As such, if in blood, if you see, it is composed of three things, that is plasma, corpuscles, and then you have the electrolytes. And in this corpuscles you have WBCs and RBCs. Okay. So in this RBCs, what you have is that there is a iron pigment of hemoglobin, and this acts as a oxygen carrier in the RBC. It acts as a oxygen carrier in RBC, and acting as the oxygen carrier. If you see this diagram, this shape, it is quite round and flexible. It is quite round and flexible. So it easily passes through the blood vessel. It easily passes through the blood vessel, thereby supplying oxygen to the rest of the body from the blood. Okay, but what is happening in sickle cell anemia is that this round and flexible structure of the RBC, that is getting distorted, and it is assuming a shape of the sickle shape, that is a sickle shape or a crescent shape, and that is why it is called sickle shape anemia. Sickle shape anemia. Now, account of this, since the supply of oxygen in the body is taking through this path through the pigment of hemoglobin, when this very process is distorted, there is an oxygen deficiency that is taking place in the body, and account of this oxygen deficiency in the body, what is happening is that there are multiple malfunctions that are occurring in the body, such as somebody may be getting a incident of stroke, or regular body pain may be there, and in some cases it may be fatal in some other way. So this is the basic problem with sickle cell anemia, and especially in the tribal population in India, this is having a very high prevalence rate. And because of this high prevalence rate among the tribals, and in particular, and the other Indian population in general, what government has done is that it has started a national mission for elimination of sickle cell disease in India by which year? 2047. So government plans to eliminate sickle cell anemia in India by which year? 2047. And what is sickle cell anemia? It is a genetic disorder of RBC, that is the blood disorder kind of a thing. What is happening? The shape of the RBC is changing, it is becoming rigid and sticky, and because of that, the natural flow, the ease of flow that was there in the round and flexible shape, that is not there, and on account of this, the oxygen transport in the body is blocked or it is hampered. So this is the basic crux of this article, that is what is sickle cell. Remember that now India has an indigenous drug to treat sickle cell disease, and the year for elimination of sickle cell anemia is 2047. Now let us move to the next article. Now this article is basically regarding the CAR-T cell therapy. CAR-T cell therapy. Now what has happened is that Mr. Kamal Pundir, this appears on the Indian Express in the I magazine, and it tells that this person that you're seeing on your screen, Kamal Pundir, he has become first patient in India to be treated by CAR-T cell therapy in a public hospital. And in the private hospital, who was the first person? Please tell me the name in the comment section. So he has become the first patient to be treated by CAR-T cell therapy for cancer in India in a public hospital. Now, if you see the prevalence, if you see the relevance of this topic, again it is relevant from GS paper 3 perspective, that is the perspective of science and tech. And you had a question on CRISPR in 2018. So this shows that these biotech developments that take place, that are very important from the point of view of UPSC. So if you see in this CAR-T cell therapy, the National Cancer Registry, it says that there are around 14 lakh cases of, around 14.6 lakh cases of cancer in India currently. And the thing is that by 2025, they are going to increase by around 13%. So this is a very high prevalence rate of cancer in India. So in this regard, present ecosystem is such that the treatment of cancer is quite costly. The out-of-pocket expenditure is quite high in case of cancer treatment. And in this regard, the CAR-T cell therapy becomes quite revolutionary, which is said that it is able to bring down the cost of a cancer treatment, which is about 4 crore rupees, to around say 10 lakhs or maybe 5 lakhs. So this is a major achievement of this therapy, which can democratize the cancer treatment in India. Now, what is basically cancer CAR-T cell therapy? We are going to understand. Now, in CAR-T cell therapy, what happens is that we saw the WBC there. WBC is where the immune system of body is functioning. Now, in this, you have two kinds of lymphocytes, that is B lymphocytes and T lymphocytes. Now, this B lymphocytes and T lymphocytes, they basically act as the immune system of the body. They basically act as the immune system of the body. That is, if any foreign particle that is harmful for your body, it has entered, what this immune system, especially the T cell, will do is that it will attack that foreign particle and it will cure your body. But what is happening in the case of cancer, if you know that in cancer you do not have a growth of any foreign cell, that is your very own cell, they are going for unregulated form of division, and due to that unregulated form of division, a kind of tumor is developing because of unregulated growth of the cell. So since this is not a foreign cell, the immune system of WBC, that is the T cell mechanism, that does not recognize what the cancer cell, and on account of this, the benefit that may have accrued to our body in fighting cancer because of T cell does not take place. Why? Because it does not recognize T cells in India. So in CAR T cell therapy, we are solving the problem of this recognition. That is, what we are doing is that first we extract T cells from the body, and extracting that T cell, we are genetically modifying that T cell to encode that T cell with the information through which it can recognize the cancer cell in the body. That is a genetic modification, so that T cell becomes able to recognize that particular cancer cell. That is by addition of an inactivated form of HIV virus. Inactivated form of HIV virus that is not harmful for the body, that is attached to the T cell to act as a delivery mechanism, and after this attachment, that T cell is grown in various numbers, in very high numbers, and after growing this in very high numbers, it is again reinfused into the body. Now what will happen is that this T cell has been encoded with a certain message that a particular cancer cell is harmful for the body and it needs to be attacked. It needs, like, this T cell will now act as a weapon. Why? Because of the coded information it has got by the genetic modification, and as soon as it enters the body, now it will attack the cancer cell. So this is why this is called what? Immunotherapy. That is, your own body's immune system is treating the cancer. That is immunotherapy, and the conventional model is that of chemotherapy. And that is why this is considered more financially viable also, and body wise also, health wise also, it is considered more reliable and helpful. Okay, so this is immunotherapy and that is chemotherapy. So this is the basic mechanism of CAR T cell therapy. Okay, now let us discuss the last topic of today, and that is from the section of history. That is, in the topic of Indian culture, you have a portion of literature. And in this article which is there on the Sunday magazine of the Hindu, there is a very famous personality mentioned, that is Gulbadan Banu Begum, who was the sister of Humayun. And being a sister of Humayun, she wrote Humayun Nama. So this is all I have for you today. Till then, read, succeed and enjoy. Thank you.